The reality is food never makes us feel the way we want to feel, right? Again, if anything, it prevents us from feeling, but it never makes us feel the way we really want to feel, right? What we really want, what we really crave is working through the issue because it's never
Yeah.
about the food, right? It's about what the food allows us to avoid and or the void it fills.
What are we going to talk about today? No, don't worry. Just kidding. Just having some fun. Trying to lighten the mood here because we got emotional eating on the agenda. So we're going to start today by seeing if I can stir up some emotions with you. Are you ready?
Oh, I guess so.
Yeah. Did I make you nervous with the intro? Because that was my goal.
Yes.
Okay.
Very.
Good deal. Like, where are we going here?
Yeah.
All right. So, hot seat.
All right. Here we go.
Are you ready? Adam, what do you do when you feel lonely?
I will usually text friends or call a friend.
Okay. Hey, that's awesome. It's been said that loneliness can be addressed by finding somebody with whom to express yourself. So, right on, dude. Okay, I have another one. What do you do when you feel bored?
Haven't felt bored in a long time.
Whoa. Okay, we
Bored?
gotta talk about that.
I know. I gotta skip that one. Bored. I have not felt bored in a long time. I'll probably wind up cleaning. I'll do some sort of cleaning project.
All right. Well, that's got to get done too. I like it. We'll have to do a separate podcast about you not feeling bored. Highly recommend it.
I'm all for it.
All right, I got one more. What do you do when you feel joyful?
Usually when I feel joyful, I act joyful. I'm silly. I'm usually playing with my kids, having fun, doing something fun with them.
Okay, that's great. Awesome. So I ask all these questions because I think we could all benefit from asking ourselves these questions. And I know a lot of times when I ask my clients these questions, we might confront some emotions along the journey that they're on. And I'll say, oh, well, or you know what, even at the start, a big one that we all face is stress, right? Like, what do you do to help yourself with stress? And a lot of times they don't have an answer. Right. Or maybe they say, well, I've meditated a couple times.
Right.
Or, sometimes I'll walk. But mostly, Adam, it's food.
Yeah, that's the default. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about emotional eating. And to be clear to those of you listening, tuning in, we all do it. We all do it. Every single person. Anybody who says they don't emotionally eat well, I would venture to say they're part of the 0.01%.
Yeah.
Because, eating can be emotional, positive, negative, neutral, right? There are things that happen physiologically that elicit emotion. So we all emotionally eat. We're all on the same playing field. This isn't about you doing more than me, Adam, me doing more than you. Agreed?
Agreed.
All right. So, Adam, what is emotional eating?
My definition of emotional eating is when you're eating to change the way you feel.
Okay.
So you feel a certain way, you don't like that feeling, or perhaps you do, you don't even realize it, but you're eating to change the way you feel. That's the bottom line.
How well does that work?
So the tricky part is it works extremely well in the moment because you will change the way you feel, or more accurately, you probably will go from feeling to feeling nothing. So you're actually numbing yourself. So you're kind of have this uncomfortable feeling typically. I usually equate emotional eating with negative feelings. But you have this feeling, it's uncomfortable. You use food, you're kind of suppressing it down, you're pushing it down. Imagine like this garbage can overflowing. You're pushing down that garbage. But as soon as you stop the eating, the feelings come back. And that's one of the reasons why emotional eating is so intoxicating and tempting, is because it does work, but you need to keep
Mm,
on eating for the feelings to be pushed down.
yeah,
And
I think we
oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
What were you gonna say?
No, I was going to say it's kind of like, the door-to-door salesperson. That door-to-door
Mm,
salesperson is going to keep knocking on the door. Sometimes it's far more effective to just open the door and say, "Hey, how can I help you?" and deal with the emotion versus just pushing it down, suppressing it down. Because again, as soon as you're done eating, the feelings come back. So it doesn't actually change the way you feel. Well, I guess it does, but it really more so numbs how you feel.
right, and I think that's a really good differentiation. It's numbing. It's kinda like putting ice on it for a little while. Once you take the ice off, the feelings are likely to come back, right? Or it's just like temporary pain relief.
Yeah.
Um, so when I was preparing my notes for this talk today, you know me, I love to look up a good definition. And I think a lot of us equate emotional eating as a coping mechanism, which, to what you've said, yes, in the short term, a coping, right? But the true definition of cope is to successfully and or effectively overcome
Hmm.
or deal with whatever it is, right?
That's
So,
interesting.
right, like ultimately, emotional eating doesn't lead to successful or effective overcoming or dealing with the feelings. So,
Right.
right there, I think it's helpful to just say, hey, it's short term, but it's not going to be successful or effective, right?
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
hopefully, right, then we can say, all right, well, let's figure out effective or successful ways to overcome or deal with these feelings. But before we get there, Adam, how do you know if you are emotionally eating?
So typically, when you're emotionally eating, you're craving a specific food, you're craving a specific texture. You can have snack after snack, food after food, and nothing is hitting the spot.
Mm,
Whereas when you're physically hungry, which is ideally what we want to listen to, you can eat something and you feel satiated, right? You feel satisfied. I always like to go
okay.
back to my broccoli test. The idea is, if you wouldn't eat broccoli, feel free to insert any vegetable, then you're not actually hungry for food. You're hungry for something else.
I love that one. It's so effective. And as we've said, it can make you angry. Or at least makes me angry sometimes. I'm like, I wouldn't eat broccoli. um, Also, emotional eating, like, or emotional hunger, I should say, comes on really quickly, right?
Yeah,
Like, I feel like it kind of strikes like a lightning bolt, and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to have that thing. Is that accurate?
no doubt. It is definitely a feeling that comes on suddenly, whereas physical hunger builds up, it comes on more gradual, for sure.
Okay. So, the really crucial thing is we can't skip this part, right? Like, we can't skip trying to figure out, is this physical or emotional? Because it's a key to learning how to fill the toolbox with other coping mechanisms for these feelings. So you have to be able to determine these sensations within yourself, right? So in order to do that, we have to reconnect with our body. We have to establish and nurture awareness, right? Um, that's hard to do.
Yeah,
Agreed?
agreed.
Right? Like, and that takes time. And I just want to say that because I think some people think, like, oh, okay, well, Adam and Haley have told me this little broccoli trick. I know I know the difference between physical and emotional hunger. I should figure this out right now. But this actually takes time. This takes some practice. And I would say, like, give yourself a couple of weeks of trying this out.
Yep,
You're
yep,
going to mess it up
yeah,
too. It's going to be messy. That's okay, right? Like, this is not small fry work. This is tough, especially if emotional eating has been something you've done for years and years and years.
yeah.
Agreed?
I mean, for many people, it's ingrained since they're children. I mean, you
Mhm.
feel a certain way. Your parent or guardian says, "Hey, have some cookies," right? I mean, very
Mhm.
early on, you're conditioning your kids to, whenever they feel something, especially sad, eat. So,
Yeah,
this is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this stuff, but it is
it is.
definitely a very powerful tip in that, you need to be able to determine if you're actually physically hungry or emotionally hungry. So once we determine what you are, then we can go into the next step.
Yeah, so the next step is, all right, so let's say, Adam, like you figured out like, oh, I recognize that I'm trying to eat to ultimately numb how I'm feeling. What would your next step be if you caught yourself in that moment?
Yeah, my next step is always, what do I really want in this moment? Right? What am I
Hmm,
really after? What am I really hungry for? Because it is rarely about the food. It's about what the food allows us to avoid and or the void it fills. So
okay.
once I determine I'm emotionally hungry, great. Now I welcome it with open arms and I try to figure out what it is I really, really want.
You welcome it with open arms?
Maybe it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I try to embrace it because you know
Yeah.
what? Whatever it is I'm feeling, I can deal with.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I mean, I think that's part of it, right? Like, let's just take a moment to really replay what you just said. Say that again.
So the first step is I diagnose whether I'm physically or emotionally hungry. If I determine I'm emotionally hungry, I figure it out. I figure out what it is I really want. It is
Okay.
rare. What do I really want in this moment? Right? It is rarely about the food. It's about what the food allows us to avoid and or the void it fills.
And then you said something, whatever the emotion is or whatever the feeling is, I can deal with it. Is that what you said?
Well, I know I can deal with it. I have support. I have coaches. Like, we work through this stuff and
Okay.
we can deal with it.
So I know I'm like drawing attention to that, but I think that's really important because I think if we all stand back, right, and just say, like, maybe you conjure up somebody who you know who's been sad lately or who's been stressed, or a family member or friend who's expressed frustration, right? Like, look at them and it's like, okay, they're having a feeling and they're feeling it.
Yeah.
I can do that, right? Feelings, it takes a little practice, right? And I think it's a big leap of faith and a huge practice of trusting yourself if you've not practiced feeling feelings, but they are meant to be felt and we do have the capacity to do that. It just takes practice. And I mean, the news, I won't say it's the good news, but the news is like it's not gonna be the worst thing we've ever done, right?
Yeah.
Like we can feel feelings.
Well, we this is kind of alludes to something we've touched upon in the past. Is like it is scary that in this world it seems like we're trying to help people avoid their feelings.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents say they want their kids to be happy. One of my goals is for my kids to be happy, of course, but I want them to be able to experience and deal with and handle all the emotions, right? Because if their
Mhm.
goal is only to be happy, great, but I want them to deal with sadness, frustration, disappointment, all that stuff, because that's part of being, you know, an adult. And I think one thing we can learn from kids, whether you have them or not, is when you look at a little kid and something doesn't go their way, typically they just cry. They cry, they let it out, they may even have a little temper tantrum, but then they move on
Mhm.
and they feel their feelings, to your point. They feel their feelings. And
Yeah, well, go ahead.
that's where it's at.
Well, that's living, right? Life is feeling all the feelings. You can't just feel one. You can't just select happy and numb everything else because that won't be happy.
Right.
Not actually, right?
Right.
So, maybe the bigger theme is let's practice feeling our feelings, which is going to put a hamper on this whole emotional eating coping mechanism strategy. Um, all right, so you've identified the feeling you were trying to numb, and then you step back and you say to yourself, well, what is it that I'm actually wanting right now? Oh, and you know what? I actually have a great moment to share a huge success with one of my clients recently.
Please.
She caught herself in this moment of ready to eat emotionally, right? Like she could feel the drive, she could feel it within her, and she stopped herself and she did exactly what you did. And she was like, what do I actually want?
Yep.
What is it? What am I feeling? She was bored.
Hmm.
She actually heard the response, right? That other voice there was like,
Right.
I'm bored. And she took herself to the movies, which is something I actually brought up on a call in the previous week. I was like, this is amazing.
That's
This
fantastic.
is amazing, right? Like, And it was so successful, and from that moment on, hearing what it was that was really bothering her and then feeling brave enough to try and respond to that and address that, you would not have believed how mindful she was from that point on. Like the
Yep.
way in which she tended to her needs and felt that feeling and let it guide her into actions that were more in alignment with how and who she wanted to be. It was so awesome. So I just had to share
No, I
it.
love that. Thanks for sharing. It reminds me of one of my clients. I mean, they realized recently that they were tired, right? And in the
Mm,
past, they would kind of come home and have some snacks, but what they really wanted was a quick little nap. And they excused themselves. They went upstairs for 20 minutes. Their kids were set. They were doing their homework. 20 minutes, she came down. She felt like a different person. And,
yep.
the reality is the only way through emotional eating is to deal with what is driving those triggers, right? What's driving it. And
Yep.
so I always like to ask myself some questions. I think questions are where it's at. Questions open us up, right? And that's the goal here. And
Mhm.
it's, what am I really hungry for? What can I do about it? And why don't I do anything about it?
Oh, number
So
3.
yeah, what am I really hungry for? What can I do about it? And why don't I do anything about it? Um, and number 3 is the tricky part, because there are times where we might not want to do anything about it, but at least you could acknowledge that. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to eat, right? You can just say, here's what's bothering me. Here's what I could do about it. I don't necessarily feel like doing anything about it. But just that awareness, bringing it to the surface, is so often just the answer, right? Because at least you can feel what you're feeling. You understand what's going on.
Yes, definitely. And when you're in a better state of mind, then you can ask yourself too, like next time I'm feeling that way, because sometimes there's nothing we can do about the thing causing the feelings, right? Like there's so little that's within our control.
Yeah.
So, but another good thing to examine outside of the moment, right? Like I wouldn't encourage, I mean, you can certainly ask yourself, well, what else can I do besides eat to numb myself? It's probably not the time you want to do this. But outside of that moment, ask yourself, like, what do I do when I feel anxious? And make a list. Adam, you love lists. You
Love
probably
lists.
got like index cards with your answers on it to these questions. But
Well,
like,
yeah.
go
I
ahead.
mean, when I'm overwhelmed, the first thing I do is I make a list of what I'm overwhelmed about. That
There
actually
you go.
makes me feel better. That actually changes the way I feel versus suppressing how I feel. Very big difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Movement is a powerful tool. Movement will change how I feel, whereas food suppresses how I feel, right? It's a big
Yes.
distinction. And the
Yes.
reality is, food never makes us feel the way we want to feel, right? Again, if anything, it prevents us from feeling, but it never makes us feel the way we really want to feel, right? What we really want, what we really crave, is working through the issue, because it's never
Yeah.
about the food, right? It's about what the food allows us to avoid and or the void it fills.
Yep. So it's important to think through like, okay, once you start the work of undoing your emotional eating, and if you've got a coach, they can really help so much, kind of expedite this process,
Oh
right?
my God.
Because
Yeah, I mean,
like
yeah. So go.
we have these blind spots, we can't see what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
So what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, a coach just, is a massive game changer. But that's, ultimately where it's at with emotional eating is you're avoiding taking action, right? The action is where the magic happens. And you can take the action ideally. And if you do that, amazingly, the cravings start to subside. Um, that's ideal. But if not, you can at least identify what it is you really want.
Yeah. And that's part of the process too. That's part of the work. So don't ever imagine that we're saying like, "Oh, there's a perfect outcome to emotional eating." It's all just process work. Um, but you do need to identify strategies other than eating for helping you with those feelings, right? Especially if you've been in a place where you haven't felt feelings in a while, it's really important to have some strategies in place. Because they're big. They're big, they're overwhelming. especially if you're not sure how they feel. Boredom, Adam.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do I feel this feeling? And I think your movement recommendation, to me, movement, because you want to move feelings out of you. You want
Yes.
to move them through your being, move them through your body. There's a theory out there, it's just energy. It's just an energy you're not used to feeling. Move it. Move it,
Totally.
honey.
Totally. Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, what else needs to be said?
I think the challenge I have for you this week is next time you're tempted to emotionally eat, and I do think it builds, right? As we talked about, it's interestingly enough, I think physical hunger comes on gradual, emotional hunger comes on suddenly, but we do feel it
Mhm.
building, right? I equate it to like you're walking up the stairs. Imagine a really tall water slide. You're walking up the stairs and you're at the very top, right? And there's either two ways. Either you're walking back down, which is never fun, or you're going down the slide. And going down the slide to me is emotional eating. You're just like, all right, I'm going for it. I'm just emotional eating. It's an easy way down. You could turn around though. You can make a U-turn and go the other way. And when you feel
Mhm.
it starting to build, when you feel yourself starting to feel uncomfortable, maybe you're just having a long day, this person's driving you nuts, whatever it might be, you can identify that and take steps to correct it. And my challenge for you this week is before you emotionally eat, commit to doing something else first. Just one thing, whether it's making a list, going for a walk, watching a funny YouTube video, texting a friend, calling your coach, texting your coach, emailing us, whatever it might be, commit to doing one thing first and then see how you feel.
Yep.
Because the problem with emotional eating is it's challenging to overcome, but we're also conditioned, right? It's become habitual, right? As soon as we feel some sort of discomfort, we're reaching for food. So it takes time to change habits. It takes time to break those habits. So commit to this week doing something different in that moment. And then if you still want to emotionally eat, fine, go for it. But at least you're challenging yourself to do something different.
I love it. I think that's a great challenge. It's a great first step in the process. And when you do it, it's successful. Don't poo-poo it if you end up emotionally eating anyway. That wasn't what we're talking about, right, Adam? We're
Right.
talking about let's try something else first and see how we
That's it.
feel.
Because there is also the idea, well, it's not even an idea, the fact of, emotional eating less. What I mean by that is if your
Mm,
go-to is usually eating a pint of ice cream and you only have a half a pint of ice cream or three quarters of a pint, or you even leave a few bites, that is still a win.
yep.
That is still a win. So
Yep.
doing something less is still progress. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Well, not even give yourself the kudos.
Credit.
Yes.
Credit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, allow yourself to, remember, it's progress, not perfection, right? It's better than before. Those are the types of wins we're after when it comes to emotional eating. And the reason why I'm so passionate about emotional eating is I truly think it is the number one reason why people are not where they want to be physically, right? They're eating because they're emotionally hungry. And it takes time, but I promise you, if you stick with it, if you trust in us and the process, when you overcome it, it is life changing because then you can stick with it. You could have the best diet in the world, but if you never change your relationship with food, then it doesn't matter. So give yourself the gift of time and patience. Give yourself the gift of self-compassion to take one step forward, take two steps back. That's all part of it. But I promise you, when you work through this, you're going to set yourself up for sustainable fitness, sustainable health for the rest of your life. Truly.
Absolutely. We see it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just so often people are so, and I understand we want results. We all want results, but they're so focused on the short-term results that they're totally losing focus of the MPH aspect of this, right? The mindset, psychology, and habits. So
Yep.
give yourself the gift of time and patience. Practice these things. Determine if you're physically or emotionally hungry. Determine what it is you really want in the moment. Try to take action if you can. And for this week, do something different before you emotionally eat. You feel that feeling, commit to doing something else first, then see how you feel.
Well said. All right, guys. We look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, take good care.